Hi, I am Mita Naya, and today is Friday, and the date is 10th September, and I will tell about my hobbies, what I like to do most in my life, and what want to do, what I want to do. Um, etc. So I'm starting now. I have two hobbies in my life. Means I like to do two works in my life every time. Want to do two works. I have two hobbies like um, at first, I like to read storybooks. Um, I when I don't have anything, means when I cannot get anything for spending time, then I like to read different storybooks, English stories, Bengali stories, etc. Is Actually, I prefer to read Bengal when I did not know English language properly. Then I liked to read Bengali stories because then I could understand Bengali. In Bengali language I can understand everything. Otherwise in English language I could not understand anything. So that's why I did not get any interest by reading English stories. But English stories are really very beautiful stories if I can understand. So now sometime I try to read sometime I read English stories, but I have no English story books. I have all Bengali story books. I have three and four Bengali story books. And when I was so child, means when I read it in class 9, class 8, then during book fair, no, I did not go in book fair, but otherwise when I went to another fair for any festival, etc., for worship, any worship, during Pala Boishak, there has a fair. So then then I brought lots of story books for reading. Um, then then I brought some story books. um, and otherwise I also get story books in my birthday, as a gift. My sister-in-law gave me a story books during my birthday, and it was really means it was really very beautiful story books. There has different types of beautiful stories, detective stories, suspicious stories, means all kinds of stories there had. Otherwise I always liked to read ghost, means horror stories. Horror stories. So I had lots of story books, horror story books. So I had three horror story books, and I have one story books, and there had no horror stories, but there had some beautiful stories written by Satyajit Ray. Eker Pithe Dui, the name of my story books is Eker Pithe Dui, written by Satyajit Ray. And it's really very, there had different types, means really very well stories. And I when I used to go to the school, then I could not read my storybooks, means then I did not get any leisure time. So that's why then I could not read. But for during this pandemic situation, I read it all stories of these story books. And they had some stories I read it again, and I liked to there has some stories which is really very beautiful, and I like to read these stories again and again. And um, and I told that I had some three ghost story books, but these story books is not so interesting. Means there is no not so interesting stories. um, everything is there has some fictitious stories, fiction stories, and I don't like to read fiction stories, but they in this book there have some one, two or three well stories, so I read it already. I read it stories, and otherwise I also read English stories. My textbook. I had a textbook, English textbook, and there has lots of good stories, well stories, and I like these stories of my textbook. Um, and I also read it some I had I had lots of stories in my Bengali textbook also, and all stories was really very beautiful. English means means I had some stories in my English textbook, and I had some stories in my Bengali textbook, and this story was really very beautiful, well stories. But sometime when I told before that I could read Bengali stories easily by myself. Otherwise I when I read it in English stories, then I couldn't then I also understood everything, but sometime I could not understand everything. Means I could not understand any line or any para properly. Then I took help my teachers, and these stories was really very beautiful, well stories. And I also want to buy some English story books, and I also have a wish for going to the book fair, and was I also have some wish for going book fair and buy different types of books. When I read it in class 11, then I got a book, English Shakespeare book, written by Shakespeare. Means there had some stories written by Shakespeare, and there had five stories. These five stories was really very awesome. Means I read it Othello, Macbeth, every comedy of errors, As You Like It, etc. And these all stories was really very beautiful. And I also have this book, and it was not so easy. Means the language. Uh, so there had some word in the stories I could not understand, and I could not yes, I could read all stories properly, but I could not understand stories, the meaning of every line properly, because it was in very tough language, tough there had some tough words, and these tough words I could not understand the meaning of these tough words. I had to need I needed help of my teachers. But these five stories was really very good stories, and otherwise and I always like to read big stories. I don't like to read any short stories, brief stories. Yes, sometime when sometime I'm trying to tell that I like to read middle stories, means not so big, not so small, it like that. And during this during this pandemic situation, we had lockdown here. So during this lockdown, every noon, I read my Bengali story books for some minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, as far as can I get time. Sorry, as far as I could get time. Otherwise, I also like to read magazines, different types of magazines. I like to read magazines, um, and I also got lots of magazine from my school Anandamela. Anandamala, I had lots of magazines, and I have lots of magazines. Anandamala, I got this in class 5, 6, and there also had different types of stories, and in this magazine there had some game, um, puzzle game, um, word series game, and really I had five I have 5 or 6 magazine from Anandamala. I got these magazines, and in these all magazines there had lots of stories, beautiful stories, short, big stories, but well stories. And sometime my father brought some magazines with newspaper. They health magazines. They had